1. Come on. 2. 3.
Before her sudden passing at just 37 years old, Hayley McNeff was more than a bodybuilding champion. She was a force, a bright light, as her family lovingly called her, whose presence could light up the darkest corners of any gym, classroom, or room she walked into. But behind her strength, her jokes, her discipline, and her radiant energy, there were parts of Hayley's story that the spotlight never touched. And now, with her gone, those quiet parts speak louder than ever. Her death on August 8, 2025, was described by loved ones as unexpected but peaceful, a phrase that left many in disbelief. Hayley wasn't just alive, she was vibrant, the kind of person who made others laugh without trying, who trained with unwavering intensity, who could deadlift her body weight and still ask if you were doing okay. In a world that so often only praises the image of strength, Hayley lived its reality, physically, emotionally, spiritually. Born in Sudbury, Massachusetts, she had been an athlete from the start, riding horses, diving, skiing, until she found her true passion in bodybuilding. In 2009, she rose to national prominence by winning the prestigious East Coast Classic, dominating the stage with not just physique, but presence. That victory, however, was just one of many layers in a life lived with courage and intention. Hayley later appeared in the acclaimed documentary, Raising the Bar, offering the world a rare look behind the spray tans and stage lights, a vulnerable glimpse into the sacrifices, discipline, and emotional toll of professional bodybuilding. She wasn't afraid to show the cost of greatness, and that honesty is what made her unforgettable. But Hayley was never just a competitor. She earned a fine arts degree from UMass Amherst and went on to study psychology at the graduate level, driven by a desire to understand and help others. Her ambition wasn't rooted in ego, it was rooted in empathy. Whether on stage or off, she was someone people turned to, trusted, leaned on. That's why her death left a wound. Because the world didn't just lose a champion, it lost a soul. Someone whose strength wasn't in how much she could lift, but how much she gave of herself to others. And in the days that followed, as tributes poured in from fellow athletes, coaches, friends, and fans, one thing became heartbreakingly clear. Hayley McNeff didn't just shape her body, she shaped lives. Hayley McNeff rose to prominence during a transformative era in competitive bodybuilding, a time when the sport was no longer confined to niche magazines and underground gyms, but instead broadcast across social media, streaming platforms, and glossy documentaries. The early 2000s to mid-2010s marked a shift in how fitness culture was consumed and celebrated. Muscles were no longer just about mass, but about message. And Hayley McNeff had one. Power could be graceful, discipline could be joyful, and strength, above all, could be kind. From her earliest days, Hayley stood out, not just for her physique, but for her essence. Raised in Sudbury, Massachusetts, she grew up with an adventurous spirit and an athlete's heart. She rode horses competitively, dove into the silence of water as a springboard diver, and sliced through the snow on skis long before she ever stepped onto a stage. But when she found bodybuilding, something clicked. Here was a sport that demanded everything: control, resilience, self-mastery, and Hayley gave it everything. She trained with the kind of discipline most could only admire from a distance. Friends recalled her 5 a.m. lifts, her scribbled notebooks tracking macros and rep schemes, her ability to laugh in the middle of pain. She wasn't chasing trophies. She was chasing growth. Every rep was a form of self-expression, every competition an opportunity to elevate the image of female strength in a male-dominated sport. But even as she trained her body to peak performance, Hayley nurtured other parts of herself. She pursued a degree in fine arts from the University of Massachusetts Amherst, a field rarely associated with the world of iron and grit. It was there, among brushes and canvases, that she honed her emotional awareness, a trait that later drove her to graduate studies in psychology. Her duality was extraordinary. In one space, she could command a stage, drenched in sweat and determination, holding a trophy above her head. In another, she could sit quietly in a classroom, asking questions about trauma, connection, and healing. This unique blend of athleticism and empathy made Hayley more than a competitor. She was a bridge between worlds that rarely touched. The theme of Hayley's story, even early on, was clear: integration. She refused to be only one thing, not just an athlete, not just a scholar, not just a funny, radiant friend. She was all of it. And she lived with an urgency that seemed to whisper, "You don't know how long you have." That same intensity and awareness would later be what drew filmmakers to her for Raising the Bar, a raw documentary series that peeled back the curtain on the personal sacrifices of competitive bodybuilders. Hayley didn't just share her training methods. She shared her fatigue, her doubt, her loneliness, and her fierce, almost defiant will to push through it all. She became a beacon in the fitness community, not because she was perfect, but because she was real. She laughed hard, she trained hard, she broke down and kept going. In a culture obsessed with external transformation, Hayley offered something deeper, a portrait of a woman transforming from within. Hayley McNeff's rise wasn't cinematic. It was carved day by day in sweat, pain, and sheer grit. Her ascent began in quiet corners of local gyms, long before the spotlight, long before the praise. She wasn't chasing a title, she was chasing mastery, and that made all the difference. In 2009, Hayley shocked the East Coast bodybuilding circuit by clinching the overall championship at the East Coast Classic, a fiercely competitive event that drew some of the most elite athletes in the country. What made her win extraordinary wasn't just her symmetry or definition, it was her presence. She stepped on stage not as someone performing, but as someone declaring, "I belong here." Judges took notice, audiences took note, and suddenly the soft-spoken athlete from Sudbury was in demand. But Hayley didn't bask in the attention. Instead, she returned to training with even more intensity, knowing the price of progress was consistency. Her life was defined by discipline, calculated nutrition, relentless workouts, tracking every macro, monitoring every fiber of muscle development. Yet somehow she maintained balance. She laughed, she painted, she studied. In a sport often dominated by obsession, she stayed whole. Around this time, Hayley became a central figure in the cult fitness documentary series, Raising the Bar. The series followed aspiring bodybuilders, capturing not only their triumphs, but their sacrifices, their financial burdens, their emotional struggles. Hayley's segments became some of the most talked about. Unlike others who flaunted strength, she offered transparency. She let the camera linger on her fatigue. She talked openly about body dysmorphia, the pressures of social comparison, and the toll of perfectionism. In one episode, after a particularly grueling prep cycle, she looked into the lens and said quietly, "They think this is about looking good. It's not. It's about surviving yourself." Her words cut through the noise of an industry often focused on aesthetics. She gave voice to what many athletes felt but couldn't say. And in doing so, she became more than a competitor. She became a mirror for others. Her authenticity didn't go unnoticed. Invitations came to guest pose, to speak at seminars, to mentor young women entering the sport. Hayley accepted, but only when it felt real. She never played the game. She didn't chase sponsorships that didn't align with her values. She didn't glamorize the grind. Instead, she humanized it. Still, she kept showing up. She trained. She studied. She cheered for others louder than she did for herself. And just when it seemed like Hayley McNeff was entering her next chapter, one where her mind and muscle would lead side by side, the world lost her. No warning, no final post, just silence. And for those who loved her, the question remains, was she ever able to rest? Hayley McNeff always seemed unbreakable. On the stage, she radiated poise and power. In the gym, she was relentless. In her personal life, she was the one everyone turned to. The motivator, the anchor, the quiet protector. But what the world rarely saw, and what she never fully revealed, was just how much it cost her to hold that role for so long. As her career evolved, so did the expectations placed upon her. By fans, by peers, and perhaps most harshly, by herself. She wasn't just a bodybuilder anymore. She was a mentor, a role model, a beacon of positivity. Every message, every appearance, every smile had to be on. The more she inspired others, the less space she had to acknowledge her own weariness. Close friends recall moments when Hayley would sit in silence after training, her hands trembling from fatigue, her eyes distant. Not from exertion, but from something deeper, a mental weight, invisible but crushing. She would brush it off with a laugh and say, "Just tired, gotta keep moving." But behind that brave mask was someone pouring from a well that was running dry. In her final year, Hayley had quietly taken a step back from competition. She spoke more often about balance, about healing, about redefining what strength meant to her. She continued her graduate studies in psychology, often saying she wanted to create a bridge between the physical and mental aspects of athleticism. But even as she studied healing, her own wounds remained unspoken. The industry had little room for vulnerability, and Hayley knew it. That's why she kept smiling, kept training, kept lifting, even when the weight she carried wasn't just on her shoulders, but in her heart. Then came August 8th, 2025. News of her passing spread quietly at first, then rippled through the fitness community like a shockwave. The official statement from her family described her passing as unexpected but peaceful. No further details were released, no cause disclosed, and that silence became its own echo. Tributes flooded in from fellow athletes, mental health advocates, and fans around the world. Dave Palumbo, a respected coach and media figure in the bodybuilding world, described her as a beautiful soul, brilliant mind, and powerhouse of potential. Sean Ray called her sweet, talented, and gone far too soon. Samir Banat simply said, "This hurts." But perhaps the most telling tribute came not from a public figure, but from a former mentee who posted online. "She made me feel like I mattered, even when I couldn't look at myself in the mirror. She saved me, and I wish I could have done the same for her." That message struck a nerve, not just because it was heartfelt, but because it revealed something unspeakable, the possibility that Hayley, in all her giving, may have never felt safe to ask for help in return. Her passing became a reckoning. For a community built on appearances and grit, Hayley's story exposed the quiet suffering that can exist behind perfect physiques and flawless routines. It reminded everyone that strength without rest is unsustainable, that even the brightest lights can burn out in silence. She didn't leave a note. She didn't make a final post. But in her life, in the way she lived, gave, and broke herself open for others, she left behind a message that no one should ignore. Check on the strong ones, especially the ones who never ask. At Legends and Secrets, we've told stories of icons. Those who lived large, performed loud, and left behind legacies shaped by scandal, glory, or tragedy. But Hayley McNeff's story is different. It's quieter, more human, and perhaps more important. Hayley didn't chase the spotlight. She built her legacy in the gym, in the classroom, in the quiet moments between sets when she chose to encourage someone else instead of resting herself. Her version of success was never defined by followers, sponsorships, or headlines. It was defined by impact, the kind that doesn't always get written into history, but lives on in the hearts of those she touched. In a world obsessed with the image of strength, Hayley redefined it. She taught us that strength is not just about lifting more, grinding harder, or showing up at any cost. It's also about compassion, about listening, about knowing when to stop and when to speak up. And perhaps most radically, it's about being vulnerable. Our channel sees Hayley as a rare figure in modern fitness culture, someone who refused to let the system shape her into something she wasn't. She could have gone mainstream, sold a brand, become a sanitized version of herself. Some stories don't end. They echo. Hayley McNeff's journey wasn't about medals or magazine covers. It was about meaning. In a world that so often asked women to shrink, she expanded. In muscle, yes, but also in heart, in voice, in presence. She entered every room like a warm front, full of force but full of light. Now that room is quieter. The gym feels emptier. The silence she leaves behind is heavy not because of her absence, but because of how fully she once filled the space. There are still voices that quote her, still hearts she touched, still lives she helped reshape. Not with perfect form or stage poses, but with truth, with the reminder that we are not machines, that strength without soul is hollow, and that it's okay to be tired, even if you're strong. Somewhere there's a young girl watching Raising the Bar for the first time, seeing Hayley speak softly about struggle while showing fierce determination. Somewhere, someone is walking into a gym for the first time, carrying pain, and remembering that it's okay to start small. Somewhere, someone is resting, because Hayley reminded them that rest is part of strength too. She didn't say goodbye, but maybe that's because she never really left. Her laughter still rings through the stories people tell. Her presence still lingers in every act of kindness done in her name. Some stories are never told, but now you know.